When you think of haunted places, buildings like Alcatraz, the Villisca Axe murder house, and the Amityville house come to mind. Their stories have been circulated since we were kids and have been the subject of various YouTube videos. In this series, we'll be looking at 10 haunted locations, some of them well known, some of them you wouldn't know unless you were a local, and some that haven't been proven haunted, but you couldn't pay me to set foot in them in broad daylight or spend the night in them, not even for $1 million. Situated just off the coast of Nagasaki, Hashima Island housed over 5,000 people in the concrete apartments at its peak in the 1950s. With a hospital, movie theater, gymnasium, a dance hall, and a school, it began as a bustling mining town in the early 1900s by the Mitsubishi Corporation, who believed that the island was sitting on rich coal deposits. By 1941, the island produced 400,000 tons of coal per year. During World War II, hundreds of Chinese citizens and prisoners of war were forced to work in the undersea mines. Because of the treacherous conditions and brutal treatment, over 200 workers lost their lives, and there are speculations that there were casualties that are still unaccounted for. As petroleum began to replace coal as the main source of energy, mines across the country began to close, and in 1974, when the mines were nearing depletion, Mitsubishi announced that the mine on Hashima Island was to follow suit. The lights of the once bustling island were extinguished, and, leaving everything they couldn't carry, the inhabitants headed back to the mainland. With the building standing as a tribute to days now gone, tours are offered to the island at the same time every day. Though the reality of paranormal activity has not been found, the crumbling structures pose a significant threat, meaning self-guided tours are forbidden. Still, many say the trip is worth it. Located in Habara Town, Japan, and overlooking Fukushima, north of Tokyo, Takakanonuma, Greenland opened as an amusement park in 1973, but its doors closed 2 years later with speculation surrounding the exact cause. Poor ticket sales and renovations were believed to be the cause, while others believed it was due to the number of accidents and possible deaths that occurred on the rides. It reopened in 1986 and operated for 13 years until it was shut down for good in 1999, being left to decay. Today, the roller coaster and Ferris wheel have been replaced by solar panels. Aside from the eerie feeling the area hosts to match the decaying structures, there is one known ghost story that revolves around an urban explorer named Bill Edwards. Edwards claims to have visited the park in 2011 and taken dozens of photos. When he went back to review them, he discovered that all but one had been erased. The remaining photo was of the entranceway, but it was shrouded in mist and held the outline of a little girl in a white dress. It is still possible to explore the location at one's convenience, with directions given freely by locals. Brampton Heritage Theater, or the Capitol Theater, was built in 1922, but didn't open its doors until late February of 1923. The opening marked Brampton's growth as a residential community. A two-story building, it presented vaudeville acts as well as silent films. In 1946, the Odeon Corporation purchased the building and demolished the orchestra pit to make upgrades for the projection used in talkies, or talking films. Then in 1981, the city of Brampton purchased the theater from the corporation and restored it to its prominent landmark status. Patrons have reported a cold chill running down their spines as they exit the building, and the theater houses a black curtain with an infamous reputation. One person reported seeing the figure of a grim reaper standing next to the curtain. Legends also tell of an aspiring actor who was murdered in the dressing room, and along with strange voices, it's said that the actor's spirit is still searching for the one that took his life. One of the largest museums in North America, the Royal Ontario Museum provides art, world culture, and the natural history of Toronto, attracting more than 1 million visitors every year. Established on April 14, 1912, also known as the day the Titanic sank, it didn't open until 1914. It shares its resources with the University of Toronto, who had control of the museum until 1986 when it gained its independence. With more than 6 million items and 40 galleries, it's easy to see how hauntings can naturally occur. According to one volunteer, he and a fellow employee were working in a back office when what sounded like footsteps entered the room, and soon after, something had tapped him on the shoulder. The coworker claims to have seen a shadow figure enter the room before it happened. Along with this experience, vintage music has been said to drift into an occupied room, but only when the occupant is sitting down. When they stand to find the source of the noise, the music stops, only to start again when the person resumes sitting. Seems like a considerate spirit to me. I mean, I hate silence, especially in museums. Kind of makes you feel like you aren't alone, you know? Founded in 1895 by the Sisters of Divine Providence, which originated in France, Our Lady of the Lake University was the first San Antonio institute of higher education to receive regional accreditation. It was originally a 2-year university for women until 1969 when it became co-ed. Dedicated to education rooted in Catholic tradition, the development of every student, and unwavering commitment to the communities, this is the last place you would expect to hear of anything paranormal, yet stories abound on the campus and online. Reports range from pianos playing in empty rooms to the story of a nun who will lock doors and only unlock them when you ask her nicely. But there is one story that stands out above the rest, and that is the story of a boy that has been affectionately called Jack Jack. He has been known to play with students by rolling a marble back to them if you roll one to him, even take off with student possessions and later return them. Though no record exists of a child dying on the premises, people feel a connection to the spirit and usually go along with whatever hijinks he likes to play on the unsuspecting. Built in 1869 by architect Lucas Pfeifenberger, the mansion once featured 11 marble fireplaces and carved stairway banisters that were unfortunately stolen while it sat abandoned. It was originally owned by Henry McPike and sat on 15 acres of land, one of the highest points in Alton called Mount Lookout. It was here that Henry McPike perfected what became known as the McPike grape. After 1936, the house changed hands several times, the last occupant having been Paul A. Leschinger, who lived there until his death in 1945. It was purchased in 1994 by Sharon and George Luke, who are working on renovating the house. Many psychics have felt the presence of the McPike family and the servants, as well as the spirits of former owners. Balls of light and figures have been photographed in the basement, and the cellar is reportedly the hot spot for the paranormal activity. Built in 1858, Hannah House was one of many passages on the Underground Railroad, owned by 37-year-old Alexander Hannah. Hannah was a farmer, a prospector, sheriff, postmaster, court clerk, and a civic leader. One evening, Hannah welcomed a group of slaves into his home. He gave them food and allowed them to shelter overnight in his straw-covered basement while on their journey to freedom. During that fateful night, an oil lamp was knocked over, soaking the floor and allowing the flames to spread. It's reported that some of the group died in their sleep, while others succumbed to smoke inhalation. It is believed that even if they had been awake, they would have chosen to die rather than go back into slavery. It was in the morning that Hannah discovered what had happened. Fearing discovery and retribution for aiding slaves, he buried the bodies, hiding any trace of participation, as well as the identities of the deceased. Most claim that this act caused the spirits to become trapped within the house. Hannah owned the house until 1899, when his heirs sold it to another family. Since then, paranormal phenomenon has become a daily occurrence. The smell of rotting flesh has been said to manifest in the second-floor bedroom where Hannah's wife Elizabeth had delivered a stillborn child. The smell of roses has been reported to drift into this room from sources unknown. Doors will swing open unexpectedly, ghostly apparitions will manifest, and objects have been seen to move on their own. As well as the regular tours, the owners also offer investigations. Now this next one has been featured on multiple TV shows, ranging from Mythbusters to Ghost Hunters. It's also been the subject of many YouTube videos. And while the history has been told in a multitude of ways, some of the stories about why she purchased the house have been untrue. This historical narrative has been taken from history books as well as the website itself. Sarah Lockwood Pardee married William Wirt Winchester on September 30th, 1862 in New Haven, Connecticut. And on June 15, 1866, Sarah gave birth to a girl they named Annie. Within a few weeks, the child died from a severe malnutrition deficiency known as marasmus. She would be the only child the couple ever had. Tragedy, however, was not quite finished. In December of 1880, Sarah's father-in-law, Oliver Winchester, passed away, leaving his son the owner of the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. The following year, on March 7, 1881, William succumbed to tuberculosis. Many would see these events as nothing more than unlucky, but Sarah, believing herself to be cursed, sought help from a medium in Boston. The medium told Sarah that she was being haunted by the spirits who had been killed by the Winchester repeating rifle during the war. The spirits instructed Sarah to move west and build a house, but more than this, they told her to never stop building. If she did, then she would follow her husband and child. In 1884, Sarah moved to California and purchased an 8-room farmhouse on 161 acres of land in what is now known as San Jose. Using her $20 million inheritance, she hired 2 teams of workers so that construction could continue 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. According to historians, Sarah was obsessed with the number 13. There had to be 13 panes of glass in every window, there were 13 chandeliers, and the house even had 13 bathrooms. In 1906, when the house stood 6 or 7 stories tall and was nearing completion, a great earthquake leveled the top 3 floors and caved in some of the other bedrooms. Rather than clearing the slate and repairing the damage, she decided to board off the collapsed rooms and remodel the interior. Soon, there were staircases that led to nowhere, doors that opened into a steep drop outside, and even windows built into the floor. Servants often needed a map to navigate the house. On September 5th, 1922, Sarah Winchester died in her sleep, and construction on the house came to an end. Current owners say that it took movers 8 truckloads a day for a week to empty the entire house of furniture, but no evidence exists to support this. Though no ghost activity has been reported, visitors come from far and wide to explore the mysteries within. Tours and dining are offered, with flashlight tours given in October and November. The history of the DeJarnette Sanitarium is something reminiscent of Nazi history, and, not to speculate, were probably a major influence in the later atrocities. Dr. Joseph DeJarnette was a pioneer of eugenics, i.e., forced sterilization. In the 1920s, DeJarnette lobbied for the state of Virginia to pass a law to make sterilization compulsory to prevent mental defects from procreating. He went as far as to testify against a woman named Carrie Buck, asking for the court to sterilize her for being, quote, feeble-minded, a case which, unfortunately, he won. With support from notable backers such as the Carnegie Institute, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the Harriman Railroad Fund, the movement would go on to sterilize over 60,000 Americans, all of different race, with illnesses such as insanity, drug and alcohol abuse, and even classifying poverty as an illness. In 1932, at the doctor's insistence, the Virginia General Assembly decided to build a semi-private sanitarium to house these defective people, though most of the sterilizations took place at the state hospital and not the institute. Dr. DeJarnette retained a superintendent position until his retirement in 1947. Though the nature of the patients admitted to the institute ranged from housing mentally ill adults to children and youth with severe behavioral disorders and children with severe emotional issues, when the stock market crashed, it hit hard the individuals, leaving them without proper care. In 1996, the building was closed and a new hospital for children was built on the same property. Full-bodied apparitions have been reported by tour guides and visitors, as well as cold chills. The building is currently owned by the Frontier Cultural Museum. Thrill seekers are urged to call, not simply because the building is succumbing to age and therefore hazardous, but it also contains asbestos. Just a friendly reminder for ghost hunters like me who sometimes don't follow the rules. All prisons have violent histories. This is a universal fact. While Eastern State Penitentiary and Moundsville Reformatory have been named the most haunted prisons in the U.S., the New Mexico State Penitentiary shares that title by one date alone, February 2nd, 1980. For over 36 hours, inmates from a maximum security ward wreaked havoc on the prison, and with help of other inmates, raped, tortured, and killed 33 other prisoners. Now you may be asking, how did it start? Aren't prisons supposed to be heavily guarded? An easy explanation would be to say that they had a poorly executed and maintained system. But the truth is, the real story is much darker and much more graphic. One guard with minimum experience had been assigned to control the 100 prisoners in the maximum security ward, all of whom had been drinking alcohol that was made inside the prison. With no cells to house this many men, because at the time they were under construction, they were housed in a single large cell block set up dormitory style. When the riot began, there were only 15 guards on duty in the entire prison. Now let's take a moment to imagine that. 15 guards against 1,100 inmates. As the drinking reached its peak and the men became angry, they were able to overtake the guard and relieve him of his weapons. Their next stop was the prison pharmacy, where they stripped it of every drug it contained. They then gained access to the prison's control center and released other inmates. At this point, there was no stopping what happened next. The reign of tyranny started in cell block 4, where the stool pigeons were housed for their safety. Under normal circumstances, this area would be impossible to access, but by means of an acetylene torch that had been housed in the construction zone, there was nothing standing in their way. I'm not going to go into detail about what happened on that block, but to this day, a permanent outline of one victim is still evident. During the riot, 90 prisoners were injured, some of them victims of the atrocities, while others died from drug overdose. Thankfully, none of the guards had been captured or killed, having managed to hide until it ended. Early Sunday morning, all the prisoners surrendered when the National Guard entered the prison. To this day, not one person has been charged with the crimes committed during the riot. But the riot led to the closure of the prison and instituted new operating procedures for other prisons in the state of New Mexico. Since the prison's closure, many of the buildings stand empty, save for one cell block that has been used as storage for movies filmed at the location. The prison has become a hotbed for ghost hunters and the activity within. On Halloween, a paranormal group was allowed to host a radio show inside the prison. Upon entry, they heard what sounded like the cell doors closing, one after the other. A psychic who had been given the opportunity to investigate before tours were allowed reported the feeling of extreme negative emotions near the gas chamber in the prison's basement. Kind of redundant, but moving on. A scary story is also told of a producer and an actor who had once visited the gas chamber. Half joking, half serious, the producer dared the actor to sit in the chair inside the gas chamber. Upon entering the basement, the producer lost his nerve when he saw a single lit candle sitting on a chair inside the viewing area. Thinking it was a joke put on by the producer, the actor ran inside the gas chamber and sat down in the chair. Looking back and seeing the producer's shocked face staring into the viewing area, he followed his gaze and saw two dark figures looking right where he was sitting. At the insistent waving of the producer, both men headed back upstairs, running as soon as they reached the top floor. And that's the end of this episode of 10 Creepy and Haunted Places. I would personally like to thank the participants of the Markiplier Heroes group for giving me the wonderful suggestions for this video. Now, while some of them couldn't be featured for lack of evidence or being unable to find them on the internet, I want to thank everybody who commented. You guys are really incredible and have really helped to bring my channel along. So like and subscribe for more videos, and I will see you in the next haunting. Bye, guys.